Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Today we're embarking on a pretty ambitious exploration, a really comprehensive look at how we as humans have built our economies.
Yeah, and not just how they were built, but also why they've often, fallen short.
Exactly. And then we'll dive into what a radically new framework called Unitarism proposes as maybe a way forward.
We're going to pull apart some fascinating insights from this new book, Unitarism. And, this isn't just another dry economic theory.
Definitely not.
It fundamentally challenges some of our sort of long-held assumptions about wealth, power, and what societal well-being actually means.
So our mission today is really to uncover its foundational ideas.
Right.
Understand the author's pretty bold vision and critically compare it to the economic systems we've all known throughout history.
Yeah.
Capitalism, socialism, all of it.
This deep dive isn't going to be confined to just dusty theories.
Right.
Instead, we'll be connecting the dots, starting way back, maybe with the earliest forms of exchange in ancient Mesopotamia.
Wow, okay. Way back.
All the way to the complex, globalized world we navigate today.
And the central question we're asking is, well, it's profound. Is there a better way to organize our collective resources?
Yeah.
And maybe more importantly, what could a fundamentally different approach actually mean for you, your community, and, our shared future?
Precisely. It's an in-depth look at humanity's continuous and often, let's face it, difficult search for stability, prosperity, and equality in how we manage everything collectively.
So we'll journey back to the very beginning, exploring the historical evolution of economic thought and practice.
All to fully understand the urgent call for change that seems to drive the creation of this new system. The author, from their unique perspective, really makes a compelling case that the world isn't just ready for something different,
But desperately needs it.
Yeah, desperately needs it. The author's urgent call for a new system.
So, okay, let's unpack this right from the start. The author of Unitarism, they don't really shy away from confronting a difficult truth, do they? They describe a world that feels increasingly unstable.
I mean, we see constant headlines about wars, economic collapses, social systems just struggling to cope.
Right.
I think many of us have felt that sort of pervasive pessimism, that deep sense that things just aren't working, or maybe that the old ways are fundamentally breaking down around us.
The author really taps into that collective unease, that nagging feeling that real progress is just, elusive.
What's particularly striking here, I think, is the author's observation that this kind of widespread skepticism isn't shocking at all. It's almost a rational response.
Totally. Think about how many times we've witnessed broken promises or failed revolutions, systems that consistently seem to prioritize profit over people.
We've been told that, a new policy or a new leader would fix everything,
Right.
only to see the same problems persist, or sometimes even get worse.
So the core question the author poses is whether this loss of hope itself has become the biggest obstacle, or maybe if we've simply been conditioned to believe that truly transformative change is impossible. Conditioned by whom, though? Maybe by those who benefit most from the status quo.
Well, that's the implication, isn't it? It really makes you wonder if our ingrained belief system about change is holding us back more than any, practical hurdles.
It's definitely more than just feeling hopeless. It's an acknowledgement that the grand systems we've lived under, capitalism, socialism, communism, they all started with these high ideals,
Yeah.
right? Often tied to profound moral or ethical visions.
Yeah, they promised a better life, equality, prosperity, amazing innovation.
But then, as the author points out, in practice, they've repeatedly led to inequality, exploitation, and deep dissatisfaction. For huge parts of the population, it seems like no matter how noble the vision.
The reality always falls short.
Yeah. So this raises a critical question. Why do these often well-intentioned theories fail so consistently in practice?
The author cleverly brings in statistician George E.P. Box's famous quote, "All models are wrong, but some are useful." The fundamental difference, they argue, is that economic systems aren't these neat, closed, theoretical models like you might find in physics.
Right, they involve people.
Exactly. They deal with unpredictable human beings, their emotions, ambitions, fears, complex power struggles, which just defy the neat, logical frameworks that might work in a lab.
So the core insight here isn't just that humans are flawed, but that any really robust economic system must design for those flaws.
Yes, maybe by building in mechanisms that actually make self-interest serve the collective good rather than just hoping it will align naturally.
So it's not just a matter of flawed implementation, but maybe the theories themselves are built on an idealized version of human behavior that just doesn't exist.
Precisely. They assume people will always act rationally or always for the collective good, and that's just not our reality. We are complicated beings.
Take capitalism, for instance. It assumed the profit drive, guided by that invisible hand, would naturally lead to wealth for all, efficient resource allocation.
But too often, in practice, it resulted in the consolidation of power, hoarding of wealth, and the exploitation of the vulnerable. We've seen this play out over and over, right? The rise of monopolies, staggering wealth disparities,
And socialism, aiming for fairness through collective ownership.
that consistently struggled with bureaucratic stagnation and lack of innovation. Central planning often just couldn't keep pace with dynamic human needs or foster individual ingenuity,
And communism, theoretically appealing for its vision of equality.
but fraught with authoritarianism and economic mismanagement in its real-world applications. I mean, significant human rights abuses, massive economic inefficiencies. The gap between the theory and real-world human behavior just became a chasm.
It makes perfect sense then when the author quotes Milton Friedman, who famously observed, "Capitalism would require angels to work perfectly, while communism would need ideal people."
Exactly. We live in an imperfect world populated by imperfect people.
So the urgent call is for a system that acknowledges that reality, right? That doesn't fight against human nature, but is robust enough to handle its flaws without collapsing.
And here's where their author's personal story really distinguishes this work. Their background isn't your typical academic economic theorist.
Right, not at all.
They've actually lived through the turmoil of 3 wars, restarting their life from nothing 4 times.
Wow. That's a profound firsthand experience of systemic fragility, a deep understanding of how economic and political systems can utterly fail people, forcing them to rebuild from scratch again and again.
It's clearly not just an abstract intellectual exercise for them. It's deeply personal and urgent.
What's fascinating, too, is the perspective they bring, deeply rooted in business, not just theoretical economics. The author observes that economic theory often falls short when it comes to practical, real-world application, whereas business thrives on the principle of growth.
Right. Business as a discipline is about creating value, innovating, adapting to real market needs and challenges. This pragmatic, results-oriented view directly shaped the development of Unitarism.
Pushing it beyond abstract models towards something designed for actual messy implementation.
So this isn't just another academic proposal to be debated in ivory towers. It's born from a deep, lived understanding of what doesn't work and an urgent, palpable need for meaningful change.
The author states pretty clearly that the book isn't proposing incremental change, which, let's be honest, often feels like rearranging deck chairs on a sinking ship.
Right, tinkering around the edges.
But a complete reimagining of how our economic systems fundamentally function. It's a bold call to action, forged from a lifetime of witnessing systemic failures firsthand.
Grab.
2. The deep roots of economy, from ancient exchanges to empires.
So to really grasp the author's vision, we probably need to rewind, like you said, to the very beginning. How did humans even start thinking about economies?
Yeah, I imagine it all began with simple barter systems, right? Trading a tool for some food or, I don't know, one type of animal for another. A direct exchange of what you had for what you needed.
That's exactly where it starts. But what's truly fascinating is how quickly societies recognize the inherent inefficiency of pure barter. This was the double coincidence of wants problem.
Right. I need what you have and you need what I have at the same time.
Exactly, which is often really hard to find. This frustrating limitation directly pushed early societies beyond simple barter. We see this evolution clearly in ancient Mesopotamia around 3000 BCE.
Okay.
They adopted commodity money like livestock or grain. Imagine a farmer needing a new plow but only having barley.
Right.
With commodity money, they could trade barley for a standard measure of silver, then use that silver to buy the plow from a completely different artisan later.
That makes things much more flexible.
Totally. And we even have written records on clay tablets, no less,
Yep.
from that era documenting incredibly complex transactions. It shows how sophisticated these early systems became.
So not just simple trades.
No, not at all. Temples and palaces, for instance, played these central roles in managing vast resources. They acted almost like proto-banks and centers for wealth redistribution.
Interesting. And then in ancient Egypt, we saw a totally different model, didn't we? A highly centralized, state-controlled economy under the pharaoh.
Yeah, taxes were paid in grain and livestock, and this collective wealth funded massive public works like the pyramids and these elaborate irrigation systems along the Nile.
It sounds like a stability-first approach.
Mm.
The state guaranteed provision and large-scale coordination, but in exchange for absolute control over resources.
It prioritized those grand projects over, say, individual economic freedom.
Right. Then fast forward a bit, across the Mediterranean, the Greeks introduced coinage. That sounds like a huge step.
Oh, it was revolutionary. It truly transformed trade by providing a consistent, portable, and, universally accepted measure of value.
Making long-distance exchange much easier.
Exactly, fueling the growth of those city-states. The Romans then built on this, with Roman law laying these foundational principles for a market economy. Things like private property, contracts, commercial agreements, concepts strikingly similar to what we use today.
Wow.
And we also see the emergence of early banking systems for deposits and loans, the first steps towards sophisticated financial institutions that could support a vast empire.
But despite all these innovations, this entire era, from Mesopotamia through Rome, heavily relied on manual labor and agriculture.
Really?
Slavery, especially in Rome, was a huge part of the production.
Absolutely. This highlights a really early and profound human cost of economic systems. The prosperity for some was explicitly built on the forced labor and dehumanization of others.
It really sets a precedent, doesn't it? How some systems extract value at the expense of human dignity. A pattern we'll unfortunately see repeated.
Definitely. And as societies expanded and became more interconnected, so did economic complexity. That initial barter system truly evolved into formalized markets.
Where currency became common and transactions were more structured and regulated.
Right. And these markets weren't just local hubs anymore. They became crucial hubs for international commerce, moving luxury goods like silk from China, spices from India, along these intricate trade routes.
The beginnings of truly global supply chains, connecting distant civilizations.
Well, exactly.
And this naturally led to the rise of a completely new social class, the merchants.
Yeah, they were the ones really driving this expansion. They operated largely outside traditional hierarchies, like feudal lords or state bureaucrats,
Accumulating independent wealth, creating vast networks like the famous Silk Road.
which didn't just link East and West commercially, but facilitated immense cultural exchange, too. They were, in many ways, the original global entrepreneurs, navigating complex risks for profit.
Okay. Then moving into medieval Europe, after the fall of the Roman Empire, we saw the emergence of trade fairs.
Right. These were temporary but often massive markets where merchants from all over would gather to trade goods, negotiate deals, and crucially introduce early banking innovations.
Like credit and foreign exchange, especially in those burgeoning Italian city-states like Florence and Venice.
Exactly. This period really laid the groundwork for modern finance, showing how capital could be mobilized and managed across vast distances, fundamentally different from the localized agricultural economies that preceded it.
Before that, though, after Rome fell, Europe largely shifted into feudalism, right, where land was everything.
Yeah, land ownership became the ultimate source of power and wealth. Society was rigidly hierarchical lords controlling vast estates, peasants or serfs working the land in exchange for protection.
It offered a kind of localized stability after chaotic times, maybe.
Perhaps, but at the cost of extreme economic inefficiency, very little social mobility, and pretty limited innovation.
What's fascinating here is how population growth and the gradual expansion of cities slowly but powerfully eroded that rigid feudal system.
Right. And by the 16th century, mercantilism became the dominant economic philosophy. This coincided with the rise of powerful centralized nation-states and the era of European colonial expansion.
And this theory viewed national wealth as finite, like a fixed pie.
Exactly. Nations competed fiercely to accumulate as much gold and silver as possible by maximizing exports and minimizing imports. It was essentially a zero-sum game of national economic power.
Often leading to fierce competition and colonial exploitation.
Definitely.
So under mercantilism, governments played an incredibly central role, actively regulating trade, imposing tariffs, granting monopolies.
This system directly fueled the creation of vast colonial empires by European powers like Britain. They extracted raw resources from around the world to feed their burgeoning domestic industries.
And companies like the British and Dutch East India Companies weren't just businesses. They wielded immense political power.
Absolutely. They essentially acted as extensions of state authority to control global trade and resource extraction on an unprecedented scale. They were, in essence, the very first multinational corporations operating with state backing. 3. The Industrial Revolution and the birth of modern capitalism.
Okay, let's fast forward now to the Industrial Revolution, the moment when everything truly exploded and the world transformed.
Yeah, this era was defined by groundbreaking technological innovations. Chief among them, the steam engine, perfected by James Watt in the late 18th century.
And it wasn't just for pumping water out of mines anymore, right?
No, it became the driving force for factories and revolutionary new forms of transportation like steamboats and railways, fundamentally reshaping production and society.
The textile industry was the first to feel this seismic impact, I think, with inventions like the spinning jenny and the water frame.
Right, rapidly mechanizing the production of yarn and fabric. This rapid mechanization led directly to the rise of the factory system.
Shifting production from dispersed homes and artisanal workshops to these centralized industrial hubs.
And this change didn't just alter how goods were produced, it completely redefined how people lived and worked, drawing them from rural areas into these burgeoning industrial cities, creating a whole new social structure.
Here's where it gets really compelling and honestly quite heartbreaking. While this period generated unprecedented wealth for factory owners, investors, a new class of industrialists, the working class faced harsh working conditions, incredibly long hours, and meager wages.
We're talking 14 to 16-hour workdays, 6 days a week, often in terribly unsafe, unsanitary, and overcrowded urban settings.
Imagine entire families living in single rooms, breathing in the polluted air of cities like Manchester, which became known as Cottonopolis.
The exploitation, especially of child labor, was rampant and truly devastating. Children as young as 6 or 7 were routinely employed, performing dangerous tasks like cleaning machinery while it was still operating.
That's horrific.
Yeah.
The risks they faced often led to lifelong injuries, disfigurement, or even death.
It vividly highlights the darker, often brutal side of early industrial capitalism. Profits soared for a select few, but the human toll, particularly on the most vulnerable, was catastrophic.
And many workers were also displaced from their traditional livelihoods by the enclosure movement, right? Which privatized formerly common agricultural lands.
Exactly, forcing small farmers off their property and into these desperate conditions in the cities.
But despite this immense human cost, the Industrial Revolution provided the perfect, fertile ground for capitalism's explosive growth.
Yeah, this new economic order fundamentally prioritized private ownership, fierce competition, and profit maximization.
And Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations, published in 1776, with his famous concept of the invisible hand, found an incredibly receptive audience then.
Right. The core idea was that individuals pursuing their own self-interest would, paradoxically, benefit society as a whole.
Smith argued that when individuals act in their own self-interest, seeking to maximize their own profits and well-being, they would unintentionally create goods and services that others valued.
Leading to innovation, lower prices, increased availability. Andrew Carnegie, the steel magnate, stands as a prime example of this capitalist ideal.
Building a colossal steel empire through audacious risk-taking, continuous innovation, shrewd business practices. He became one of the titans of American industry.
His success story became a powerful symbol of what unbridled capitalism could achieve in terms of wealth creation and industrial might.
But as we've seen, this immense growth also inevitably created significant social and economic inequalities.
Right. The wealth was being generated on an unprecedented scale, but it was not being distributed equitably.
And this stark disparity clearly set the stage for major societal unrest and provoked deep philosophical debates about alternative economic systems that could maybe address these glaring imbalances. 4. The search for alternatives. Socialism and communism.
Those immense social inequalities we just discussed, that stark contrast between the factory owners and the working poor, sparked a powerful backlash. It led directly to the emergence of radically new economic theories.
Socialism in particular arose as a direct reaction to the harsh realities of industrial capitalism, didn't it? A movement driven by the widespread suffering of the working class and that clear imbalance of power.
Exactly. Early socialists like Robert Owen in Britain and Charles Fourier in France, often labeled utopian socialists, envisioned cooperative societies.
And Owen, a remarkably successful textile manufacturer himself, didn't just theorize. He put his ideas into practice at his new Lanark mills in Scotland.
Yeah, his groundbreaking experiment proved that businesses could be profitable and socially responsible, providing decent housing, fair wages, education for workers, rather than just exploiting them.
It was a profound demonstration that a different path was possible, challenging those prevailing capitalist norms.
But these utopian ideas, while inspiring, were often seen as impractical or maybe too small scale to solve society's grand problems.
Right. That changed dramatically when Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels published the Communist Manifesto in 1848. That gave socialism a much more revolutionary edge.
It offered a comprehensive philosophical framework and a powerful call to action for large-scale systemic change.
So what was this revolutionary proposal from Marx and Engels?
Well, Marx argued that all of human history was fundamentally a struggle between economic classes. Specifically, the bourgeoisie, the capitalist class who owned the means of production, the factories, land, capital, and the proletariat, the working class, who owned nothing but their labor.
Which they were forced to sell.
Right. He contended that capitalism was inherently exploitative, extracting surplus value, the difference between the value produced by the workers' labor and the meager wages paid to them, as profit for the capitalists.
And this exploitation, Marx believed, was the root cause of inequality and alienation.
Exactly.
This raised the pivotal question for Marx. How could this systemic exploitation be ended?
He famously predicted an inevitable workers' revolution, where the proletariat, driven by their shared oppression, would rise up, violently seize control of the means of production, and establish a classless society, communism.
And in this ideal post-revolutionary state, wealth would be shared, private property abolished.
And eventually, the state itself would wither away as it became unnecessary in a truly equitable society. His vision was radical, promising a complete break from historical patterns of oppression.
His ideas found incredibly fertile ground in rapidly industrializing nations, where workers genuinely faced brutal conditions.
Yeah, this intellectual ferment culminated in inspiring the Russian Revolution of 1917, where Vladimir Lenin adapted Marx's ideas to establish the world's first large-scale socialist state.
Marking the very first attempt at a widespread application of Marxist principles, transforming a vast empire.
Into a state-controlled economy aiming for a classless society. And it profoundly influenced movements and political thought around the globe.
Now, while Marx envisioned total overthrow, it's important to note that many socialist movements aim to reform capitalism rather than replace it entirely, right?
Absolutely. The Nordic model in countries like Sweden, Denmark, and Norway is a brilliant contemporary example of this more reformist, pragmatic approach. It's often cited as a successful blend.
What's truly fascinating about the Nordic model is precisely that blend. They combine robust free market capitalism with extensive, strong social welfare programs.
Universal health care, free education from kindergarten through university, robust worker protections, all funded by high taxes, particularly on the wealthy and corporations.
And the result has been remarkably high living standards and significantly lower inequality compared to more purely capitalist economies.
It shows that capitalism and socialism aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. It demonstrates a pragmatic pathway to social justice without dismantling the market entirely.
But of course, no system is without its challenges. Critics of the Nordic model often point to the high taxes, arguing they might potentially discourage entrepreneurship and innovation.
Or raise questions about the long-term sustainability of such extensive welfare states in an increasingly competitive globalized economy. There are always trade-offs, ongoing debates about the ideal balance.
The ongoing debate really boils down to the fundamental role of the state versus the individual in economic life.
Right. Adam Smith's invisible hand promised societal benefit from individual self-interest. But the catastrophic Great Depression in the 1930s exposed its profound limitations and vulnerabilities.
That global economic crisis led directly to significant government intervention in market economies and the widespread rise of mixed economies.
Where the market remains the primary driver, but the state plays a crucial regulatory and often welfare-providing role.
Yet, as history shows, more extreme communist regimes like the Soviet Union and Maoist China face their own distinct struggles.
Plagued by inefficiencies, widespread corruption, and a persistent lack of innovation, largely due to rigid central planning and lack of market signals, ultimately leading to the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991.
Centralized command economies simply couldn't compete with the dynamism and responsiveness of market-driven systems.
Which brings us back to that crucial question. If capitalism inherently creates inequality and periodic instability, and communism struggles with efficiency and innovation, where do we go from here?
The author states unequivocally that neither has provided a perfect solution.
And this extensive historical overview, examining both the successes and profound failures of these dominant systems, powerfully underscores the urgent necessity for something genuinely new. a framework that can learn from the strengths and weaknesses of all these past and present attempts. V, exploring other economic systems throughout history.
So it's clearly not just a binary choice between capitalism and socialism. Throughout history, societies have experimented with all sorts of systems to achieve stability and prosperity, some quite unique in their approach.
Yeah, the source does briefly revisit feudalism and mercantilism here, which we discussed earlier, mainly to underscore a consistent historical pattern.
Highlighting how these older systems, while providing some stability for a time, ultimately concentrated wealth and power in the hands of a very small elite.
Which in turn often led to intense competition, exploitation, and conflict, emphasizing their inherent unsustainability in the long term. It's a recurring theme. Systems that only benefit a few eventually fail the many.
Then there's anarchism, an intriguing vision of decentralized economic activity based entirely on voluntary associations and mutual aid, as proposed by thinkers like Peter Kropotkin.
It sounds wonderfully free and cooperative, doesn't it? A system built purely on individual and community-level agreement.
But what's fascinating here is its practical difficulty when you try to scale it up beyond small, localized communities.
Right. The author points out that without some form of central authority or agreed-upon legal framework for contracts and property rights, maintaining order and achieving large-scale coordination and innovation, like building a national power grid or developing complex medical technology, becomes a major struggle.
So, appealing in theory for individual autonomy, but scaling it up presents significant, maybe insurmountable hurdles.
Possibly. Then another interesting idea that emerged in the early 20th century is technocracy.
This system believes that experts, scientists, engineers, economists should govern, making decisions based purely on objective data, scientific principles, economic efficiency.
Rather than politics, profit, or public opinion, it's a very rational, almost scientific approach to running a country.
But this raises a critical question. While rational in its approach may be highly efficient, it fundamentally concentrates immense power in the hands of unelected experts.
Exactly. The source explicitly mentions concerns about democratic oversight and the inherent assumption that these experts will always act purely in the public interest, without biases or personal agendas.
History has shown that even well-intentioned experts, if not held accountable, can make decisions that harm people.
Definitely. And then we have Islamic economics, which aims to align all economic activities with core moral and ethical values derived from Islamic principles,
including prohibiting interest, known as riba, and prioritizing social responsibility, fairness, and justice in all financial dealings.
while offering a compelling alternative framework rooted in deeply held moral values. Its implementation has been significantly limited in practice.
In most cases, it often coexists as a subset of broader capitalist practices, creating various hybrid systems.
Yeah, and it faces significant challenges in consistently enforcing religiously inspired economic laws in a diverse, globalized world where secular legal and financial frameworks are dominant.
The common thread, it seems, among all these systems, ancient to modern, dominant or niche, is that none have fully solved the fundamental challenges of inequality, instability, and inefficiency.
Each has its inherent strength, but also significant recurring weaknesses that seem to plague humanity's attempts to organize itself economically.
And this historical pattern is precisely what the author aims to break with Unitarism.
A new vision for economic harmony.
So, this historical tour brings us right to Unitarism, which aims to synthesize the best aspects of these disparate systems while directly addressing their ingrained failings.
At its heart, it's about balancing individual and collective interests, right? Deliberately moving beyond the old, seemingly intractable dichotomies of capital versus labor or state versus market.
Exactly. The first core principle is aligned interests. Think about it. In traditional capitalism, businesses often maximize profits, even at the expense of workers' wages, environmental damage, or community well-being.
Right.
Unitarism radically shifts this by ensuring that the success of businesses is directly tied to the well-being of their workers and the wider community.
How does it do that?
Through mechanisms like mandated profit sharing and employee ownership.
Yeah.
Imagine a company like Apple, whose massive profits aren't just distributed to shareholders and top executives, but are broadly shared with its entire workforce.
From engineers to retail staff.
Right. The unique insight here is that it doesn't just hope self-interest will lead to collective good. It designs the system to make individual and collective prosperity mutually dependent. Creates a powerful shared incentive.
Okay, that makes sense. And then there's collective well-being.
This principle ensures that all economic decisions, from large-scale investments to local business practices, explicitly prioritize society's long-term goals.
Like reducing inequality, improving public health, ensuring education, protecting the environment.
Exactly. Rather than just chasing fleeting short-term gains, entrepreneurs are still encouraged to innovate and grow, absolutely, but they're also expected and incentivized to actively contribute to the social good.
Maybe by reinvesting profits into community development or supporting local infrastructure, not just maximizing shareholder returns.
Precisely. And a truly crucial aspect, especially given our global environmental crises, is sustainability.
Environmental protection isn't an afterthought or just a separate corporate social responsibility department.
No, it's absolutely fundamental to every single economic activity within Unitarism. Businesses are not only required to minimize waste and reduce their carbon footprint, but they are also actively supported by government incentives for developing and adopting green technologies.
Pushing towards a true circular economy where resources are reused and recycled rather than extracted, consumed, and discarded, an economy designed for the planet's long-term health.
Right.
And what about innovation? We know that's crucial for progress.
Unitarism calls for innovation with responsibility. It's about fostering breakthroughs, of course, because progress is vital, but it's also about carefully considering their social and environmental impacts up front before they become massive problems.
Ensuring that the benefits of innovation are shared equitably across society, not just concentrated at the top.
Like thinking through the implications of AI and automation before it causes widespread job displacement without a plan to support affected workers.
Makes sense. Finally, there's equity and fair access to opportunities.
This principle means guaranteeing high-quality education and universal health care for absolutely everyone, regardless of their socioeconomic background, zip code, or inherited wealth.
The core idea is to truly create a level playing field where everyone has the foundational support and opportunities to thrive and contribute their full potential.
Rather than being limited by circumstances beyond their control, it's about maximizing human potential across the entire population.
The author emphasizes that Unitarism is not about creating a utopia. It wisely recognizes that no economic system, no human endeavor is ever truly perfect.
Right, it avoids that trap.
But critically, it offers a practical, real-world approach designed to work with human nature, not idealistically against it.
It acknowledges human flaws, ambition, self-interest, but seeks to build a system robust enough to channel those tendencies towards collective benefit rather than letting them cause systemic collapse or vast inequality.
It's truly an invitation to fundamentally rethink what an economy should be, not just a machine for generating profit.
But a foundation for thriving, not just surviving. The call is to move beyond the comfort of critique without action, towards actually building systems that truly serve all of humanity.
It's a powerful and timely challenge to shift from merely identifying problems to actively constructing viable solutions for our shared future. 7. Unitarism in practice. Governance, frameworks, and ownership.
So this sounds incredibly ambitious. How does this radically new system actually work on the ground?
In Unitarism, the state's role is reimagined as a collaborative approach, carefully bridging the gap between minimal intervention, like in pure laissez-faire capitalism,
And heavy, often stifling state control, like in centrally planned communist economies. It's a delicate balance, aiming for collaborative synergy.
So the state in Unitarism acts primarily as a facilitator and regulator.
Exactly. Its role is to establish the necessary legal and operational frameworks for sustainability, set clear environmental standards, and actively incentivize green technologies through tax breaks or direct investment.
Like Denmark's wind energy policy, where the government works closely with private companies and community cooperatives.
Precisely, creating a world leader in green energy. Crucially, the state ensures fair labor practices and protects human rights without stifling innovation, creating a supportive yet structured environment.
And importantly, there's a strong emphasis on decentralized decision-making.
Yes, empowering local communities and these specialized sector councils, which are described as decentralized, expert-led governing bodies for specific economic areas like energy, healthcare, or housing.
So they control economic decisions relevant to their context, fostering innovation tailored to specific local needs.
Right, rather than top-down mandates that might miss regional nuances. The Mondragon Corporation in Spain, with its extensive network of worker-owned cooperatives where worker owners have a direct say in management, is cited as a powerful real-world parallel to this decentralized empowerment.
Okay. And business responsibility and accountability are key too.
Absolutely. Within Unitarism, Businesses are understood to create value for all stakeholders: workers, consumers, the local community, the environment, not just shareholders or private owners.
How are they held accountable?
Through mandated transparency, similar perhaps to how B corporations are certified today for meeting high social and environmental performance standards. But these certifications wouldn't be optional, they'd be the systemic norm.
Ensuring a pervasive commitment to broader well-being, fundamentally different from a shareholder-first model.
It's truly a collaborative model across the board. This also includes civil society NGOs, community groups, civic organizations, actively shaping economic policy and implementation.
Like Brazilian cities using participatory budgeting, where citizens directly influence how public funds are spent.
That's a great example of the principle in action. And all of this is built on a commitment to long-term planning, actively moving away from the short-term quarterly gains that often characterize capitalist systems.
Focusing instead on generational prosperity and planetary health.
So let's get into the nuts and bolts of how unitarism distributes wealth, because that's often where the rubber truly meets the road, right? And where past systems have failed most dramatically.
Definitely. A cornerstone is profit sharing. Workers aren't just paid a wage, they directly receive a percentage of the company's profits.
Which directly incentivizes productivity and innovation because their financial interests are deeply aligned with the company's success. Everyone has a tangible stake in making the business thrive, not just a paycheck.
And even beyond profit sharing, there's a strong emphasis on employee ownership.
Yes, giving workers actual ownership stakes in the companies they work for, promoting cooperative models like Mondragon again.
Empowering workers to have a direct say in how the business is run, giving them both a voice in governance and a share in the economic returns. A profound shift in traditional power dynamics.
Right. And to counterbalance purely private interests and ensure essential services are provided, there's significant public investment in critical areas like renewable energy, foundational infrastructure, public health, and education.
Like Germany's Energiewende policy, heavily investing public funds in shifting to renewables.
Exactly. It demonstrates how such public investment can drive innovation and create immense societal well-being beyond immediate profit.
And how is all this funded?
Through fair and progressive taxation, where corporations and high-income individuals pay their proportionate fair share, with the revenue then reinvested into society to fund these public goods and services.
Much like the Nordic model's commitment to robust social safety nets and high-quality public services, ensures wealth is cycled back to benefit everyone.
Right, not just accumulating at the top. Finally, there's targeted support for small businesses and entrepreneurship through grants, low-interest loans, significant tax incentives.
Crucial for leveling the playing field against large corporations and nurturing local innovation, empowering the everyday innovator.
This brings up a question many listeners will have. What about personal property? Do you still own your home and car in unitarism? That's a huge concern for people.
Yes, absolutely. A fundamental principle of unitarism is the right to private ownership for personal use. Your home, your car, your vacation property, the author says these are completely unrestricted.
Okay, that's clear. It distinguishes it from historical communist restrictions, providing that crucial sense of personal security and autonomy.
Correct. But here's where the key distinction from pure capitalism emerges. There are limitations on ownership for income generation.
Ah, okay, so you can't just accumulate vast amounts of property, say multiple apartment buildings or commercial real estate, and rent them out for unlimited private profit without adhering to certain rules.
Exactly. If property is used to generate income, it must come under the management of the relevant sector. For instance, a housing sector council.
So if you own a property to rent it out, you'd operate within a framework set by this housing sector council. They might, for example, cap rental increases to prevent speculation.
Or mandate a certain percentage of rental income be reinvested into community housing projects. Ensuring income-generating property serves the collective good, not just unbridled private profit.
Preventing monopolization of essential assets and speculative bubbles. Similar perhaps to how Singapore's heavily regulated housing market aims to keep housing affordable.
So it's about balancing individual freedom and economic equity, allowing robust personal ownership while actively preventing extreme wealth concentration and encouraging responsible ownership that contributes to the broader economic system. Property serving both the individual and the collective.
Okay. Now, in our deeply interconnected world, how does unitarism fundamentally handle global trade? Because traditional globalization, while bringing benefits, has certainly had some serious drawbacks.
Yeah, often leading to exploitation, environmental damage, exacerbated inequalities between nations.
Unitarism fundamentally redefines global trade by prioritizing fair trade, moving beyond mere free trade. This means ensuring genuinely equitable global exchange where all participating countries benefit, particularly developing nations.
Like the Fair Trade International model, guaranteeing fair wages and safe conditions for farmers and producers.
Exactly. This isn't just charity. It's systemic fairness ingrained into trade agreements. And it's about enforcing labor rights globally, preventing exploitation by multinational corporations seeking cheaper production in countries with weaker regulations.
Drawing lessons from initiatives like the Bangladesh Accord, which improved factory safety after the Rana Plaza disaster, unitarism would make such protections a global standard.
Crucially, it integrates sustainable trade and environmental protection, ensuring trade agreements include robust environmental protections to minimize ecological impact, rather than externalizing those costs.
Like the Forest Stewardship Council certifying sustainably managed timber, ensuring trade doesn't come at the expense of planetary health. Environmental stewardship becomes a core trade principle.
Right. This commitment to fairness also extends to promoting innovation and technology transfer, aiming to ensure developing nations can access technologies and knowledge needed for sustainable growth.
Preventing the concentration of advanced capabilities in just a few wealthy nations, fostering global development and reducing reliance.
And all of this is supported by global multilateralism, with new or reformed international institutions designed to ensure trade benefits all stakeholders, not just powerful corporate interests. Similar maybe to how the European Union fosters deep economic integration among its members.
Creating a more cooperative and equitable global economic system.
Now, technology is constantly reshaping our world at an astonishing pace. How does unitarism ensure that breakthroughs like AI and advanced automation truly benefit everyone, not just a select few, especially given the widespread fears of job displacement?
Unitarism directly addresses that historical tension between innovation and labor rights, a tension we saw from the Luddites protesting machinery all the way to today's automation concerns.
It emphasizes comprehensive retraining and education programs, much like Germany's robust vocational education system, to help workers smoothly transition into new roles as industries evolve.
The goal isn't just to innovate, but to ensure people are equipped for and benefit from the future.
It also strongly promotes ethical AI and automation development, ensuring technology is designed to enhance human capabilities rather than simply replacing jobs en masse.
Like collaborative robots or cobots working alongside humans in factories, augmenting their abilities.
Exactly, shifting the focus from efficiency at all costs to human-centric progress and collaboration. And it calls for responsible innovation, balancing the pursuit of profits with profound environmental and social well-being.
Providing government incentives for sustainable practices, holding companies accountable not just for their products, but for ethical supply chains, and ensuring workers benefit meaningfully.
This discussion naturally leads directly to sustainability. We've witnessed the devastating environmental costs of unchecked economic growth. Amazon deforestation, the Aral Sea disaster. How does unitarism tackle this?
Unitarism makes sustainability a cornerstone, integrating it into every single sector and decision. It actively incentivizes businesses to adopt green technologies, drastically reduce waste, manage resources responsibly, moving towards a circular economy model.
We see elements of this in companies like Unilever and IKEA, actively working to redesign products for reuse and recycling. Within unitarism, environmental protection isn't a side project, it's central.
A core design principle. And this means comprehensive government incentives and regulations actively supporting the transition to sustainable practices across all industries.
Like Denmark's extensive investment in wind power, driven by decades of strategic government policy. It's about actively steering the entire economy towards ecological harmony.
Okay, let's talk income inequality, a massive systemic global problem. The wealthiest 1% often holding more wealth than the bottom 50% combined in many capitalist economies. How does unitarism fundamentally address this?
At its core, unitarism aims to eliminate this widening gap through its principle of aligned interests. The success of businesses is directly tied to the well-being of their workers, primarily through mandated profit sharing and widespread employee ownership.
Imagine those huge corporate profits being shared more broadly with the entire workforce, not just shareholders and top execs. That fundamentally changes the incentive structure.
And ensures wealth is distributed at its point of creation, And crucially, it emphasizes redistribution of wealth through genuinely progressive taxation and significant public investment in essential services.
Universal high-quality education, healthcare infrastructure, ensuring access for all, not just based on ability to pay.
Examples like Mondragon's comprehensive social services for its worker owners and the Nordic models of social welfare powerfully demonstrate how profit sharing and robust public services can lead to vastly lower inequality and higher social mobility.
Now, the historical struggle for workers' rights, long and often brutal, from the early Industrial Revolution to the precariousness of today's gig economy. How does unitarism transform this often antagonistic relationship?
Unitarism radically shifts the view of labor from being a mere commodity, something to be bought and sold cheaply, to a true stakeholder model.
Workers are deeply empowered through comprehensive profit sharing, widespread employee ownership, and co-determination, meaning they have a greater legally mandated say in how businesses are run.
Exactly. Think of Germany's co-determination laws, or Mondragon again, where workers aren't just employees, they're partners with a direct voice in governance and strategic direction.
This also means a profound commitment to investing in worker development, continuous retraining and education, preparing workers for the jobs of the future in emerging fields like AI and green energy.
Building an adaptable, resilient workforce that can navigate economic shifts, ensuring nobody is left behind. And the system aims to balance labor rights and innovation by actively promoting collaboration.
Seeing workers as partners in innovation, not just cogs in a machine, ensuring technological advancements benefit everyone.
Finally, education. Absolutely critical. But access is often profoundly unequal, especially where it's treated as a commodity, leading to massive student debt.
Unitarism fundamentally treats education as both a public good and a foundational investment in society's future, ensuring high-quality, free, and accessible education for all, from early childhood through higher education and vocational training.
Finland's system, often cited as one of the best for its equity and high standards, is a prime example. It's about building human capital for the entire society.
It focuses deeply on holistic development, adaptability, and lifelong learning, equipping students with critical thinking, creativity, social responsibility.
And ensuring workers can adapt throughout their lives, continually reskilling and upskilling. Germany's dual education system and Scandinavian lifelong learning programs are excellent parallels, demonstrating how continuous learning fosters a dynamic, resilient workforce. Eighth, real-world case studies and the path forward.
Okay, this might all sound like a huge leap, maybe too idealistic, but are there any real-world examples that already embody aspects of unitarism, even if they aren't fully unitarist systems? Stepping stones we can point to.
Absolutely. Think of Denmark's wind energy model with its extensive network of community-owned cooperatives. That directly shows sector-based ownership and profit sharing in action. Citizens buy shares in wind farms and directly benefit.
Aligning economic returns with sustainable practices. And Germany's Energiewende, its national energy transition, further demonstrates significant public investment in sustainable energy.
Proving that large-scale governmental commitment to green tech and equitable access is viable and can create entirely new industries.
And looking at social services, the Mondragon Cooperative's healthcare model in Spain shows how profit sharing and employee ownership can work even in critical sectors, giving workers a stake in quality and efficiency.
Right. And Finland's education system truly reflects the principles of collective ownership and equitable access, ensuring high-quality, free education for all.
Which yields remarkable societal dividends.
Even a nation like Norway, with its massive sovereign wealth fund, demonstrates a powerful unitarist principle. Profits from key national sectors, oil and gas, are intelligently reinvested for the long-term benefit of all citizens.
Providing a shared safety net, funding public services, ensuring future prosperity.
These aren't perfect unitarist systems, obviously, but they powerfully show that the underlying principles are viable and can achieve remarkable societal outcomes. Proving shared prosperity is indeed possible.
So, if these principles are viable, how do we get from our current systems to something like unitarism? What's the practical path? It seems like an enormous challenge.
It begins with comprehensive policy reforms at national and local levels, creating the necessary legal frameworks for things like mandatory profit sharing, employee ownership, establishing those sector councils.
Then, crucially, there's the need for building broad public awareness and support, extensive education and engagement to counter misconceptions.
Emphasizing how personal success genuinely aligns with societal well-being in this new framework. People need to understand what's truly in it for them, how it solves their daily struggles.
And critically, it means incentivizing business participation with genuine benefits. Tax breaks, subsidies, grants for companies that proactively adopt unitarist principles.
Making it clear that this isn't just a moral obligation, but a pathway to long-term stability and success, demonstrating it's a better, more resilient way to do business.
It also requires actively addressing resistance and challenges from entrenched interests, those who benefit immensely from the status quo.
Which involves open dialogue, a carefully phased approach to implementation, and consistently showcasing successful examples. And because our world is so interconnected, international cooperation and multilateralism are absolutely essential.
To align global trade with these new standards of fairness and sustainability.
And importantly, empowering local communities through decentralized decision-making is vital, allowing them to tailor unitarist principles to their unique needs and cultural contexts.
Making it adaptable and organic rather than a rigid, one-size-fits-all solution imposed from above, fostering genuine buy-in.
But no system, no matter how thoughtfully designed, is without challenges. Unitarism is certainly no exception. What are some of the major hurdles?
The most immediate challenge is likely significant political resistance, right? Especially from wealthy elites, large corporations, powerful special interests who benefit from the status quo.
Definitely. The source suggests several solutions. First, building broad public support and actively engaging labor unions, which can exert collective pressure.
It also hints at a gradual nationalization of key industries, like energy or healthcare, allowing for a phased transition to collective ownership.
Rather than an abrupt, destabilizing seizure, a strategic, incremental shift of power seems to be the idea.
Then there's cultural differences, especially in societies that highly value individualism and private property above all else, like the U.S. The idea of extensive collective ownership might feel alien.
Unitarism explicitly acknowledges this. The solution proposed is for the system to be adapted to different cultures, localizing sector councils to reflect regional traditions, experimenting with hybrid ownership models like ESOPs.
Allowing for flexibility and a more organic, culturally sensitive transition.
What about economic adaptation and transition from capitalism? Shifting entire industries could lead to instability, temporary job losses, economic shocks. How does unitarism manage that?
It requires gradual reforms, not revolution. Carefully managed buyouts of existing companies, offering significant incentives for businesses to voluntarily adopt profit sharing.
And critically, it highlights the need for a universal basic income UBI, potentially funded by highly automated sectors, to address job displacement from technology.
Coupled with extensive reskilling programs to prepare workers for new roles, smoothing the transition for individuals.
And of course, there's public perception and media influence. Corporate-controlled media could very well try to discredit unitarism, portraying it as radical or unworkable.
The proposed solution is robust public education campaigns, proactively communicating the benefits, leveraging social media, independent platforms, sharing real-world success stories.
It's about demonstrating through clear examples how collective ownership leads to economic stability, social equity, a better life for ordinary people, directly countering negative narratives.
And how does unitarism deal with long-term issues like sector imbalance and profitability, where some sectors inevitably become much wealthier than others?
This is addressed through a dynamic profit redistribution model, ensuring essential but less profitable sectors, public services, research, education, are continuously supported by wealthier ones.
Preventing vital areas from being underfunded, somewhat like Norway's sovereign wealth fund reallocating oil profits.
Exactly. And for natural resource management, specialized environmental sector councils would oversee sustainability standards and resource allocation across all industries, rigorously prioritizing ecological balance.
Finally, ensuring consistent civic engagement in sector councils over time is key. Participatory democracy needs active citizens. Could be a challenge.
The author suggests integrating digital democracy platforms to make participation more accessible. Maybe even exploring forms of mandatory participation to ensure broad representation and sustained engagement, baking active citizenship into the structure. Outro.
Wow, that was a truly immersive deep dive into the past, present, and potential future of our economies.
Yeah. What stands out to me most is how unitarism doesn't just critique past systems. It explicitly tries to learn from the shortcomings of every single one that came before it, from ancient barter all the way to modern capitalism and socialism.
It's an incredibly ambitious synthesis of lessons learned, definitely.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Unitarism offers a conceptual path toward a global economic system that explicitly seeks to align the interests of individuals, businesses, and governments.
Yeah, it aims for a world where economic growth isn't just about maximizing profit, but about shared prosperity, meticulous environmental stewardship, and pervasive social justice, building a fundamentally different, more harmonious relationship.
It's about building a system that's inherently resilient to the kinds of crises we've discussed, adaptive to rapid technological change like AI.
And fundamentally designed for the imperfect, complex human beings who populate our world. It acknowledges our nature and tries to work with it, leveraging our collective potential rather than fighting against it with unrealistic ideals. This raises an important question for you, our listener. If our current systems consistently fail to deliver on their promises of widespread equality and stability, and instead often exacerbate inequality and environmental degradation,
Are we willing to seriously consider a bold new framework like unitarism? Are we ready to move beyond simply critiquing the status quo to actively exploring tangible new solutions?
unitarism isn't presented as some perfect utopia. The author is very clear on that.
No, thankfully.
Instead, it's proposed as a significant step in the right direction. It's a powerful challenge for all of us to move beyond passive observation and consider how we can collectively build a more just, equitable, and sustainable future.
Where the economy truly works for the many, not just the few. What will you do with this knowledge?
Thank you for joining us on this extensive exploration of unitarism and humanity's ongoing vital quest for economic harmony.
We hope this deep dive has given you plenty to mull over and perhaps sparked a few truly compelling aha moments.